So I want to us to talk a little bit about the rise in large loads and especially AI and data centers and how that has been affecting many states across the country that we're starting to see different kinds of new contractual agreements being set up and regulators grappling with protecting customers, but also providing service to these data centers in a way by which, okay, they take some of the risk and that burden doesn't fall on ratepayers. And if, for example, this demand is not real, which could potentially happen, who's going to be left holding the bag? How has Washington been affected by this so far, and how is the commission dealing with some of these challenges?
So the investor-owned utilities have not seen the kind of demand from data centers, but their demands are rising because of vehicle electrification, building electrification, some onshoring of industry. I think we'll begin to see some of the push from data centers, but that primarily, a lot of the data center growth has been happening in the consumer-owned utility territory, particularly
Mhm.
those that own their own hydro and had excess capacity to share. So it's low cost, it's in a rural area. So that's where most of the data center growth has happened up to this point, both in Washington and in Oregon, although now Oregon is seeing some data center growth near the Portland area. So we're not on the leading edge here, but Virginia, Arizona, Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, there's a number of states that are seeing Georgia are seeing this and have been developing what I would call some model tariffs that can be used. I know some of the hyperscalers also have their own sort of model tariffs that they bring in because I think there's been more pushback in the last few months about the costs that customers might end up bearing. And so there's a real focus on trying to make sure that core customers are not bearing the cost of data centers when they connect to the grid. The Federal Energy Regulatory Commission has just issued an order related to co-locating facilities in the Pennsylvania in the PJM territory. I think there's so they recognize though that the states have the responsibility for managing the resource adequacy and the siting and the cost allocation. And so ensuring that whatever they do does not impact the state's role. And so making sure the grid is reliable and costs are not shifted to retail customers. That said, there's still some terms and conditions in these large load agreements that will ensure that the data centers don't shift this cost. And the data centers, I think, are also getting more flexible. Initially, when they came in, if you mentioned, well, could you be flexible or curtail your load? And they'd say, no, we're going to go elsewhere. And now, because they just simply need power, I think data centers are becoming more signing agreements that are based on how they can flexibly use the load. And there's folks like Emerald AI who have been looking at different programs on how to make that flexibility work and respond to the demand signals from the utility or from the market. So I think there's some maturity going on that Washington will eventually benefit from when our investor-owned utilities decide to, entertain data center growth. The state legislature is likely considering some data center bills this year to think about how to approach that. And there was a governor's task force on data centers to think about how to avoid imposing those costs on customers. So there is activity going on in Washington, but we haven't faced it directly yet.